this to me is like the really fascinating material.
We don't know what the answer is, but we're looking for patterns.
I think we're looking at kind of a type of cosmic alchemy.
The story slowly grew interest.
But still, a lot of people don't know that this technology actually exists.
The possibilities here are pretty mind-boggling.
We can't just believe that it was the work of these lone, troubled individuals.
Like a conspiracy theorist would look at that and say, well, the Illuminati or somebody planned this.
Hello?
Hello, Aaron.
Yeah, hi.
How you doing, sir?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
We were just having a discussion about maritime law.
Okay.
What do you know about such things?
I grew up in Indiana, so not a lot.
Well, see, I was not familiar with this whole concept and the sovereign citizen movement.
Oh, yeah. The gold fringe on the flag.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
We
We were just talking about that. Yeah.
We had a governor, or someone who ran for governor here a few years ago, who that was on his platform.
Yeah, in Tennessee
Oh,
here, yeah.
wow.
Basil Marceau,
Wow.
otherwise known as basilmarceau.com.
That's a great name.
He
Yes.
made it to like the Jimmy Kimmel show and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
he was so hilarious that he became a meme, I guess, before people called internet memes that.
Actually,
Yeah.
we're done. Go to YouTube and look up Basil Marceau. I think it's Marceaux. He's like from my hometown too in Tennessee,
wow.
which is crazy.
That's
Well, technically, I guess he's like, I'm from Chattanooga. He's from Saudi Daisy. We don't really like to claim those people, but
the South has such great names for things.
Yeah,
Saudi Daisy.
Saudi Daisy, Tennessee.
What is that? That's
What
bizarre.
is a Saudi Daisy?
Yeah, is it like Saudi Arabia Daisy? That's
really
like the
have
first thing I
no
thought.
clue where
Saudi
it comes
Daisy.
from. I really have no idea where that even comes from.
Do they dismember journalists with bone saws in
They
that
may.
town? Or
They
okay.
may. They may. I know
If you
there
don't
was-
vote for Basil Marceau,
Yeah. Well, they're famous for Basil Marceau, and they're also famous for their high school that looks like a women's prison. In which the vice principal got in some heat from basically blaming the dress code on the girls, saying that the girls ruin everything.
Oh my goodness.
That actually made national news. Yes, Saudi Daisy, Tennessee, for the second
That-
time in 4 years, made national news.
That is wild. Oh my gosh, yeah, I see a picture of the high school here on Google. Good grief. That you know what's sad is when you said the high school looks like a women's prison. I could just sort of picture what that looks like. So I don't know if I've been around too many women's prisons or something, but it's like, oh yeah, that's a reasonable way to describe something.
By the way, we started the interview. I just wanted to let you know.
That's fine. That's
I'm
fine.
starting this new tack where I'm trying to sound less like a bullshit radio announcer and be like, "Welcome to Conspirinormal, guys." Tried this whole new thing where we just kind of go right into it.
It's a good thing that I always sort of assume that I'm being recorded at all times.
Yes,
my paranoia.
like every
pays
good
off.
conspiracy theorist.
Yes,
yeah.
always
Yes.
assume. I did want to let you know that last night I listened to the one about Woody Derenberger.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I did want to say that any mystique that I may have had about Indrid Cold has completely thrown out the window.
He had a cool hat, man. Little cap.
Yeah, because my whole thing is about seeing, my whole introduction to Indrid Cold, I think most people, was a Mothman Prophecies movie,
Yeah.
of which we got to speak to the actual screenwriter of that not too long ago, Richard Haddam. But, he's all kind of mysterious, and it's this kind of like mystical thing. But as Woody Derenberger describes him, Indrid Cold was just some guy. And I love the part I mean, you had me rolling on this one, where he gets on the ship with Indrid Cold and his, what was, now I'm going to draw a blank. What was his co-pilot's name?
Oh, Ardo. Carl Ardo.
Carl Ardo. Yes.
Yeah, Carl.
And Indrid Cold had a wife named Kimmy.
Yes.
And there was, what was the other one? There were two other ones, Daryl and George or something like that.
Yeah, there was Daryl. Yeah, Daryl and George, something like that. So just like the most mundane names you can think of. And Spaceman Larry and Daryl and their other space brother Daryl. For people who are old enough to remember those guys, but from Newhart. But it really is a story that's been, like, Keel did a little bit of it, sort of adding some mystique, and then the movie, of course, and then in later years there've been some really strange theories about Indrid Cold being a government agent and all sorts of things. Derenberger's daughter, Tanya, spelled very oddly, like Taunia, Tanya, has written a book, something like, My Family's 50 Years with Indrid Cold, and she describes all these times when like Indrid Cold would just play with the kids when she was a kid, and he and Carl were over all the time, for cookouts and stuff, and she seems sincere.
Do you think
it's
that
odd?
It's a possibility that somebody, I mean, maybe it wasn't as nefarious as like an MK Ultra kind of thing, which I know we're going to get to later, but that somebody could have just been messing with Derenberger?
I think it's possible. Yeah.
There's all this whole there's this whole thing about it, in as you describe it, that the spaceship was just there wasn't much to it.
Right. Yeah, it was like they had bunk beds. I mean, like wooden bunk beds, like you'd see in a kid's room or something. And yeah, there's a lot. And then later, sort of, it gets upgraded in later tellings of the story to be more spacey. But yeah, it's very much that this is. I'm on a spaceship, but golly, it just sort of looks like a room. But I guess I'm on a spaceship. And the drawings from the original book had these drawings of the control panels laid out, and it was very much, buttons and levers that had labels on them that said very sort of, I was going to say flux capacitor, but thrust or yaw, very non-spacey terms. So yeah, I think the idea that this was some sort of I like to. I can get on board with the idea that was some sort of bizarre, psyop to do what, I'm not sure, but maybe just to mess with him, maybe just to with Woody a little bit. I'm not sure. That's where a lot of these sort of things fall apart is when you try to come up with some sort of rational reason why somebody would do this, and you sort of end up with they're probably kind of evil, so who knows why they do the things they do. But I'm absolutely being stalked by people with microwave ray guns pointed at my head, which is why I wear this tinfoil hat. So currently the whole targeted individual thing that I don't know if it's still around. A couple of years ago, it was huge.
It's still around. Yeah.
Is it still around?
Oh, yeah.
I occasionally I'll read something that seems vaguely normal, and then near the end, the person will just sort of point out they've been a targeted individual for their entire life, and I'm like, now what do I do with everything I just read? Because that sounds crazy, but not. It sounds too crazy for them to bother targeting you about, because you aren't credible. You aren't a credible person, so why would they target you? That's where I always sort of see it fall apart for me with some of the people who claim the government or somebody is trying to shut them up. It's like, why? They should just let you talk because you sound nuts. And, regardless of what truth you may have, you present yourself as someone who doesn't need to be listened to. if that makes sense. So,
right.
although making somebody, actually just doing a couple things here or there to make somebody think they were being targeted enough that they start talking about it discredits somebody much more than actually eliminating them.
Of course, if you look at it on the obverse of that, if it's the perfect cover, because people will just think that they are crazy, and
Right,
that you
that's
could
true.
actually be, because I think that as it says or I say in the intro, that there's technology out there that really does exist, that
Oh,
you
yeah.
can do it. Now, I don't know about in the 60s, like at the time of Woody
Well,
Derenberger, but I know now that it's definitely there.
yeah, there's a book. I got a book called, I'm pulling it off the shelf now to make sure I get the title right. Were We Controlled? The Assassination of President Kennedy by a guy calling himself Lincoln Lawrence. And this was published in 1967. And he talks about a lot of sort of mind control type things, the business of mental programming, he calls it. And there's stuff, it talks about Jose Delgado and the implants and all this stuff in 1967, long before the MK Ultra documentation was ever declassified. So, I think in the 60s, especially the late 60s, when Derenberger had this stuff going on, I think there was technology out there to do this. And it might have been a sort of thing where, why would they target somebody like Woody Derenberger for, psychological shenanigans? Why not? He's an average guy. He's an appliance salesman. He's an appliance salesman in West Virginia. He's nobody special. So why not try this out on somebody nobody's paying too much attention to?
And the thing about the Woody Derenberger story is it gets so lumped into Mothman.
Yes.
Because I think because of Keel, that Keel put it in there, because it's happening at the same time. But, I mean, it's miles and miles away from Point Pleasant.
Yeah, it's Mineral Springs is a ways. But there were sightings all over the Ohio Valley. But yeah, it was a ways away. It wasn't close to Point Pleasant by any means. I mean, West Virginia is a small place, so not it's all relative. But it took place in November of the year, weeks before the first Mothman sighting. Well, the first Mothman sighting of the Mothman wave. I mean, there's the whole Mothman has always been with us, and Mothman will always be with us, and Mothman was seen 42 times in Chicago last week, and there's the Mothman continues, but the Derenberger thing happened in such proximity to the Mothman thing that it just gets conflated in a lot of cases. And in a lot of ways, I think the Derenberger case is very much an old school contactee thing. I think I said it on the episode. It doesn't. You could take this story and put it in 1952, and you would think it's the same thing. It fits right in. But no, it's 1966, 1967.
I love the part where he goes to Lanulus and he meets the old couple from New Mexico. They're living on Lanulus.
Yes.
And it's just like the most mundane thing. It's like, they're from such and such place in New Mexico, and George and Ethel, and I met them.
It's so random. It's so random, and it's so random and charming, and you don't believe him, but you believe that I don't know. I mean, if you're going to make up a story in 1967, why this story?
Right.
And that's what I come back to with it is it's one of those things where I can't make any judgment one way or another because it's just kind of too weird. But for the most part, I think, maybe something happened to him that he portrayed in a certain way, because literally, like, within days of his experience, he is on TV in West Virginia telling his story and sounding nuts. And, and he opened himself up to ridicule, and he opened his family up to ridicule, and he ended up losing his job moving around, and he didn't write the book, publish the book until like 1970 or 71, and then it was. I actually got the book from interlibrary loan because it's almost impossible to find the original book, but I got it, and it's from Vantage Press, which was one of the big vanity publishers of the time. So he had to lay out probably hundreds of dollars to get a trunk full of these books to sell at whatever public library he was giving a talk at, and so he didn't make money off of this. Why would you put yourself and your family through this for nothing? And again, in the late 60s, this is not the heyday of contactee stories. 10 years earlier, he could have made some money, but
right.
It
had run its course by then.
Yeah, it really had. Contacteeism was pretty much done, and so there's no reason. There's no sane reason to do this to yourself. This is no way to live. But which leads me to think that something happened. I like the idea of some sort of psyop, especially with the mundane nature of the spaceship.
Well, have you heard Nick Redfern's idea that the Flatwoods Monster was some kind of weird psychological operation?
Yeah, I have, and
that would almost make more sense to set up some kind of like weird mechanical thing in the woods and see what people react to it,
Right. Yeah, and it's such a goofy monster.
Yeah.
That it really does sound like, in some ways, a 50s horror movie monster, come to life, and maybe it was, right? It's a guy in a suit, maybe. It looked like a man in a suit. Well, there you go.
Maybe it was a man in a suit.
Maybe it was. It's a guy named Fred from the CIA.
It's Carl Ardo.
It's Carl Ardo. Carl Ardo was on loan from Lanalos.
Well,
to scare the kids.
Let's leave Indrid Cold and Carl Ardo and Kimmy behind, and let's talk about some conspiracy theories.
Okay.
So this book, I believe you wrote it about 3 years ago.
That sounds about right.
About conspiracy theory. I mean, we both Sergio and I have read it. I ended up finishing it today, but it's called Conspiracy Theories: The Roots, Theories, and Propagation of Paranoid Political and Cultural Narratives.
I did not come up with that subtitle. That was it's so long. Yeah, that one was imposed on me. I had no title for it. I told the publisher, could you think of a title, because I got nothing. It does sort of check all the boxes.
So what was your reasons for writing this book? Kind of why you wrote a comprehensive historical review of all these basic conspiracy theories?
I hate money. No. It was partially in response to having accumulated a lot of conspiracy stuff and a lot of conspiracy knowledge and background as I researched the flying saucer stuff, the UFO stuff. So I had all this research that was sort of incidental to the UFO thing. I should do something. I should do something with this. And then, I was like, well, what should I do? Because there's a lot of scholarly focused conspiracy books out there. There really are. And I was reading Michael Barkin's Culture of Conspiracy, apocalyptic visions in America, or something like that. And it's really, really good. It's probably the best overall scholarly look at critical scholarly look at conspiracy theories. But it was a little old, because I think Barkin died shortly after the second edition came out, and it's I don't want to say it's not sympathetic enough to conspiracy theories, but it doesn't go into detail on some of the stories, because it covers such a broad range. and it doesn't really. And I couldn't really find anything that connected the conspiracy theories to the actual. In some cases, the actual conspiracies that were behind the out of control, that sort of at the root of the out of control theorizing. So I thought, well, that might be good. So I was like, how can I make this sort of manageable? And I didn't succeed. I kept restructuring it, as I went, because it's not conspiracy theory stuff. So it just sort of sprawls everywhere. And I had all my outlines and flowcharts and thought maps and everything. And
oh man,
I didn't.
You have like the Illuminati pyramid with all the connecting the dots. And
yeah, and I never quite got to the point where I had like the giant cork board with the
that's what we want to see,
connecting things. I never quite got to that point, but I wanted to sort of look at some of the conspiracy theories that were and are current and sort of trace them back to what actual things were going on that spawned what in a lot of cases is speculation that gets out of control. And what I found was that, at the root of a lot of these, there were things that were there. None of these were just sort of created as fictional constructs. There was something that they were based on, or something that was reinterpreted or blown out of proportion or misinterpreted. And it just sort of, the theories and speculation just sort of snowball from there. I'm making snowball gestures with my hands. You can't see it, but things are snowballing. So that's sort of what I wanted to do was sort of look at what historical truth-iness might have been behind some of these.
It's the first book that I've read that has taken, because you are a historian, and that has taken that kind of historian approach to this, of like looking at, okay, this is the root, where this comes from. This is, this conspiracy theory gave birth to this conspiracy theory, and on and on and on. And also giving like a context of really saying that some of these conspiracy theories that we deal with, some of them get like their chronologies just plain wrong. Like there's the one about the Tavistock Institute that was founded in 1947, but was claimed to have an influence to bring America into World War I. So it doesn't really work, like when you really think about it. And I've encountered this again and again, where it's like, okay, there's no way that's possible. Like nobody did their fact checked on this at all.
Right. It's very, very in some cases pretty sloppy. Just really sloppy, but it's sloppy, because they're trying to make a point. The big Tavistock Institute guy, I don't know if he's still alive. John Coleman, who wrote Committee of 300 and wrote sort of a booklet on Tavistock, and Committee of 300 was probably one of the first conspiracy books I read back when I was in college. I think somebody had typed the whole thing out into a text file and uploaded it to Usenet in like 1995, and it was it blew my mind because it connected this small cabal to everything. Yeah. And I think the problem is, what sort of jumped out at me was it connected everything, and everything isn't necessarily connected. It wasn't quite David Icke levels of obsessive dot connecting, but it was close. And I think when he went into an extended thing about how the Beatles were mind controlling young people through their music.
Adorno created all their music, right? Isn't that it?
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking, the Beatles, really? Yeah. Out of all the bands out there, you just pick the one that most people have heard of, right? It's just like, no, there are bands out there saying much more evil stuff than the Beatles. But it's just everything was tied up into too neat of a little bow, and that's, real conspiracies have things that you can't quite explain because we don't have all the information. whenever anybody claims to have all the information about how everything works, they might not.
Yeah, very true. You start the book out with a section on secret societies, and I thought this was interesting from the point of view of looking at how this is almost a reaction to the beginning of the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because we always hear about the Bavarian Illuminati and right, and why the Bavarian Illuminati, why were they so secret? Why were their governments trying to suppress them? They were trying to foment revolution. This is a revolutionary movement, and then it gets connected to communists and anarchists and every other sort of thing eventually, at least by right of center conspiracy theorists, and it gets connected to fascism by the other side, but it gets connected to sort of these sorts of things. And I was looking at this, read this big book published a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, about the history of the actual history of the Bavarian Illuminati. And one thing that jumps out is we as Americans and British people to a degree, but especially Americans, we seem to forget that in 1776, when the Bavarian Illuminati was established, we seem to think sometimes that every place on the earth, people were having the same sorts of ideas about political and personal liberty as people were having in the American colonies in the United States, and they weren't. And in the German states, in Bavaria, for example, talking about the kinds of freedom from the political power of the church and freedom to say no to the sovereign and to have some sort of political check on the sovereign's power, this stuff got you thrown in prison. So of course, if you wanted to debate that or challenge that or talk about it, you had to have a secret society. And, well, we didn't have that in America. Well, no, because we're sort of, Englishy descended American people who, are pretty much on board with, at the very least, checks on, royal power. And that wasn't the case in mainland Europe. And so, yes, from a mainland European perspective, these were dangerous, radical, revolutionary groups. But they really weren't at the time from American perspective. So our fears about revolution in the 20th century get projected onto a different context where it might not be entirely appropriate.
Yeah, it's my favorite on the Illuminati conspiracy is that Adam Weishaupt came over and killed George Washington and took his place.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite conspiracy, part of the Illuminati conspiracy.
And Robert Anton Wilson pushed that one, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing about the
Oh,
Illuminati
my gosh.
stuff is that, like,
well, he
some
had
of
such
that
an
is-
influence on getting it in this popular culture that
Right.
that it's in now. I mean, without what they made a conscious effort to do that, and now the ripples of that are still going on.
the Discordians.
Yeah, and that's the thing about anything from Wilson is there are people who read like the whole Illuminatus thing and read other things that Wilson wrote and say, well, Wilson discovered that, fill in the blank happened, and it's like, no, that's fiction, right? That it's a funny book about this type of thing, and Wilson was, he wasn't laying out what was actual historical truth in a lot of cases. He was, riffing on these sorts of cultural ideas, and
Right.
not that he didn't have some, solid conspiratorial ideas of his own, but not everything Wilson said was meant to be taken at face value.
Yeah, it's true.
Like Adam Weishaupt, killing George Washington,
Yeah.
probably. Probably
Taking his
Gonna
place. Place.
Gonna hedge my bets there.
I wonder if it was
Me.
kind of like Al Bielek being age regressed. I wonder if that has
Oh my
anything to-
gosh.
anything to do with that.
So
Al Bielek. Oh.
It seems like you go from that into when you're talking specifically about conspiracy in American culture, how the this theme at the onset of the Republic was that there was a threat of a return to monarchy of some sort. You know, we had the wars with England and then with other kingdoms, and so that was like the big conspiracies at the onset of America.
Yeah, at the very beginning, there is a concern from. I'm gonna just group people by political figurehead because it's easier. There's the Thomas Jefferson type of people, who are very concerned about the Alexander Hamilton type of people, just not really caring if we just stay in Britain's economic and diplomatic and political orbit. We're independent, but Britain's our allies, so we're just going to hang out with them and basically take their side against France. The Jeffersonians were like, hey, wait, no, Britain is bad. Let's become independent of Britain. We need to support the French Revolution, or we need to support France in their war against Britain. Both sides are concerned about foreign subversion. The Hamilton Federalists are worried about radical French Revolution ideas sort of infiltrating America and making us chaotic and dangerous. The Jeffersonians are worried about basically being a de facto colony of Britain again if Hamilton and his allies have their way. And so both sides, the first political party system in the country, the Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans, that was all based around these factions who were worried about what our sort of position in relation to Britain and France was going to be. So that fear of foreign subversion leads to laws like under John Adams, the Alien and Sedition Acts that were, on the surface aimed at preventing foreign meddling in our elections, but really was about, keeping out people who might become citizens and vote for Jefferson. So, they lengthened the amount of time it takes to become a citizen and things like that. And, had the power to expel people, had the power to lock up newspaper reporters who were critical. So there's this fear of foreign subversion, and conspiracy theories grow around that. And then when Britain becomes less of an issue after the War of 1812 and into the 1820s, the outside subversion fears turn to secret societies like the Freemasons. Yep. And you have the anti-Masonic political party pop up in sort of opposition sort of to the secret society, but more to the fact that it's the same crew of people, especially in New York State, that always have all the political power. And it's always these damn Masons, right? It's so they're up to no good. If they're not, agents of an evil foreign power, they're just kind of undemocratic and elitist, and we need to eliminate them. So there's this long running fear of outside or foreign subversion or some kind of alien influence, even if it's not a physical invasion from elsewhere, an ideological invasion from elsewhere, something un-American seeping in and sapping our vital bodily fluids, right?
Yes.
So this is a constant theme.
Yes. And the Bavarian Illuminati thing gets started around that time. I think it's like 1790s that first book is published that says that the Illuminati is trying to destroy the New Republic, and like as I understand it, that's when it's a pretty old conspiracy theory, almost as old as this country.
Yep, it was around from the very beginning.
Talking about some of the influence of religious paranoia on this line of thinking, and there was one book that you described that I have never heard of called Occult Theocracy. That's Theocracy with an S, by Edith Starr Miller. I had never heard of this, but this apparently was pretty influential.
Yeah, it was. And it had a lot of a lot of influence on later conspiracy theorists that sort of proposed there was that there was an outside occult force that was working to undermine the United States, and it goes into the Rosicrucians, and it goes into the Cathar heresy, and it goes through all these religious ideals all the way back to the beginning of human civilization. The beginning is called something like the secret, and it talks about Albert Pike and all of these sort of things. And if you listen to 1990s conspiracy theorists, especially like Bill Cooper,
Your favorite,
and
That's your favorite.
my favorite. I have a real soft spot for Bill Cooper. I really do. Not in a this guy's onto something sort of way, but he's just so interesting to listen to. But if you listen to his or read about his Mystery Babylon stuff, it's very much taken
the hour of the time.
The hour of the time. It's the curfew of your body, soul, and mind. That sort of voice like this, and the dogs barking and the sirens going off. Oh, it's I listened to it today, so it's fresh in my mind. It's good stuff, and a lot of the Mystery Babylon material is very similar to what Miller was saying in Occult. See, there's a guy, Manly Palmer Hall, who wrote a book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages in the early 20th century that goes into the same sort of thing, the ancient occult brotherhoods and their symbolism that they've seeded throughout human history, and how they're doing things behind the scenes. So you read enough of this stuff and you start to see the same sort of signs and symbols everywhere that they do, and suddenly you sound like Jordan Maxwell or somebody talking about Hollywood. The movies they talk about the magic of Hollywood because druids' wands were made of holly wood.
Yes.
And you're like, well,
makes sense to me.
Yeah, I guess. And that's the thing.
That's the name game.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. This. I just got done reading Adam Gorightly's book on James Shelby Downard. Yeah.
You're getting into my territory now.
That messed me up, man. And then I read King Kill 33 and all that stuff.
Oh,
and
man. We're kind of getting off track here. Maybe we'll save this for Patreon after we do the main discussion, because we can really.
I don't really understand any of what Downard says, so we won't get too far off track, because he's confusing to me.
You need to read Carnivals of Life and Death, and then you'll be very confused.
I did. Even more confused. Yeah.
I have no idea what he was talking about at any given time.
Although it would make a great action movie.
The only thing I know is none of that could have happened. None of it.
I don't know. He's a pretty badass little kid, man.
Gosh. You have to have a higher body count by age 10 than most people.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy. We did actually a book review section on a show about that. We actually talked about it. I could not finish that thing.
It was
so well written too.
Oh gosh, it was nuts. And then I was like, should I go to that town in Oklahoma where he grew up and see if anybody knew him? No, I'm not going to do that.
Well, guess what? Gorightly has, he's going to put out part 2, because he has some of Downard's writings. And part 2 is going to be coming out. Yeah.
And the tape recordings of an interview with James Shelby Downard has been re-released by Jim Brandon. It was mentioned in Cosmic Trigger by Robert Anton Wilson. That was a tape that he had, a tape called Sirius Rising that I guess was circulating in the underground. But Jim Brandon has put it back out, and you can order it from him on CD. It's got a nice little cover and everything.
I actually, I just recently sent some money for that very purpose to Lauren Coleman to get a copy of that. Lauren was handling some of it, some of the transaction-y stuff. So hopefully I get it.
Cool.
Because I have no idea what else I would do with my time. then then listen to that. But if anybody out there looks at Downard's stuff and his sort of mystical name symbolism stuff, it's very similar to what Manly Hall and Edith Starr Miller. It's all this idea of hidden meanings, that if you know the right, like you said, if you know the right magic words and the right secret names, you can, sort of peel this layer of camouflage off of reality and see how things really are. And then what people do is they sort of connect all that to every political and social and cultural event that they see, and they view it all through this lens of occult conspiracy. So there's that sort of spiritual side to it, overlapping with the political, and then more conventional sort of orthodox religious groups have fringe elements that do the same sort of thing.
And so Miller connected these secret societies to the political subversion of the time and the communists. And that was that really like I guess the Illuminati thing was kind of the same thing. It was Republicans and not communists.
Yeah, they're like, oh, there's a secret force out there that's seeking to undermine our government and our society and our way of life. And so Miller published Occult Theocracy in I think the early 30s, and if you're an aristocratic British person who is looking at the world, then it's sort of the darkest, deepest part of the Great Depression. What are you going to look at as the enemy? Well, communists are, on the rise in Britain and the United States in the 30s. And the Communist Party was never more popular than it was in the 1930s. So, connecting the occult bad guys to the communist bad guys is something that Bill Cooper was still doing in 2001 when he died.
Well, before we get to Cooper, I did want to ask you real quick, why you didn't include the Taxol hoax?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember why I didn't do that. It's been a while. It's been 3 years since it came out, and that means it's been about 5 years since I wrote it. I think the reason is, where was he from?
France.
Okay, that's why I didn't do it. I think that's probably why.
Keep it in an American context.
In America, yeah.
Okay,
I think that's. I was trying to think, and I'm like, I remember reading about it. I remember sort of looking at it, and why didn't I do that? And yeah, it was. I sort of excluded a lot of the European stuff because it was a big enough project already. So it's a practical reason rather than a content reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it was more of a, I don't have room for this. So, and the secret societies section, that could have, oh man, well, that could be its own book. Yeah, every chapter in this thing could be its own book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why it took me forever. Well, not forever. I got it done when it needed to be done. But
if you make them, I will buy them.
Yeah. It's like I am nearing the end of my target word count, and I still have 2 chapters to go. So
it's a relatively short book. I mean, it's only like it's 201 pages. So
it's packed, man. Yeah. It really packed a lot, though.
Yeah, the publisher, they've done lots of on length of books that sell, and so they're like, it needs to be in this sweet spot right here, because more than that and the price goes up. Less than that, the price doesn't go down enough to entice more people to buy it. So they've got a very sort of narrow window, unless there's something, some sort of major revelation, which I didn't have. But yeah, it was pretty compact. It was very sort of concentrated too, like you said.
So Bill Cooper.
Yeah,
As I said,
Bill.
that's your favorite guy.
he is.
You've got like a shrine to him in your closet.
I don't, but because if I ever have law enforcement come over here for any reason, a shrine to Bill Cooper would probably not be great. But Bill Cooper.
You know that you're a conspiracy theorist when you have you should always have your copy of Behold a Pale Horse
Oh yeah,
right next to the Holy Bible.
right there. It's right there. It's like here's the word of God. Here's the word of Bill Cooper. Do not confuse the
Or
two.
else you're a total poser.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, if I walk into a person's house and they don't have every Jim Keith book, I'm like, what are you doing with your life? You don't have the octopus on your bookshelf. It's like you're doing it wrong. But yeah, Behold a Pale Horse and Bill Cooper, and there's a new biography called Pale Horse Rider by Mark Jacobson about Cooper that just came out, and it is really, really good. He actually went out and talked to Cooper's pal Doyle, and some of Cooper's some of his many former wives who left him because he was an abusive drunk, and it's a real insight into Cooper, the very dangerous, frightening person. But yeah, Cooper, just a thumbnail sketch for people who might not be aware of him. He comes on the scene in the late 80s as part of the John Lear, Krill Papers, Area 51, alien abduction, alien cover-up, alien contract with the U.S. government. They give the government weapons in exchange for being able to abduct people and experiment on them. People are implanted and they're going to rise up as an alien fifth column and take us over at some point. And Cooper claimed that he had seen documentation confirming all of this when he handled intelligence briefings for the commander of the Pacific Fleet when he was an enlisted man in the Navy. And so he's one of these former military intelligence UFO whistleblowers. That's how he sort of arrives on the scene. And very quickly it becomes clear that he's more than that. Because if you look at his UFO stuff, he starts putting other stuff in there that's very much more political conspiracy material. And probably the two biggest things that ended up in the alien stuff that he put up on bulletin board systems and the pre-internet was he had some discussion of the Rex 84 plan to round up political dissidents and put them into prison camps when the New World Order takes over. So that is sort of a more of a political conspiracy thing that he inserted in there, and also CIA drug running and the CIA sort of using drug sales, especially to inner cities and urban areas in the United States, as a way to fund various black projects. And he's talking about that in UFO stuff. And it's easy to forget this, or easy to not have known it in the first place. But there was a time, like 30 years ago, when you did not have that degree of crossover between UFOs and sort of hardcore political conspiracies. You didn't have that. And Cooper starts to do that. And then Cooper gets himself in trouble because John Lear and a guy named John Grace cooked up the O.H. Krill document as sort of a hoax, sort of to see what people would think. And it's sort of a basic rundown of the government collusion with the aliens from the viewpoint of a hostage alien that the government had. And Cooper says, well, I saw that in the Navy too. And he says this like at an interview for like a TV show or something. And like they're on like a station break or something. And Lear, like the story, Lear's story. And whether or not you believe every word that comes out of John Lear's mouth is that's between you and the Lord God. But he takes Cooper aside and he says, Bill, what are you talking about? Me and John Grace made this up. And Bill's like, you're lying. I saw it.
Oh god.
And Lear's like, no, I made it up last week or something. And so Cooper begins to lose some credibility. Don Ecker, the director of investigations for UFO Magazine, does an expose on Cooper in UFO Magazine that just sort of disassembles almost every claim that Cooper made. And Cooper would hate Bill Ecker until the day he died because of that. If you want a good time, if you're doing nothing on a Friday night or something, get yourself a beer, go to the internet, and go to just Google Hour of the Time, MP3 or whatever, and all of Bill Cooper's old radio shows are up on there. There's one from 1999 called Reply to Bill English. And Cooper, in that episode, Cooper goes off on this epic rant against Don and Vicky Ecker of UFO Magazine, talking about how Don was never a cop. He was actually a failed corrections officer who didn't lose his leg in the line of duty. He accidentally shot off his own leg because he was drunk and playing with a shotgun. Says he was lying about his military career. Says that Vicky Ecker started UFO Magazine as a CIA front operation to disinform the UFO community because Vicky Cooper was a prostitute for the Mayflower Madam and was caught. And so the CIA basically entrapped. It's like basically, you know, he's like, Don Cooper's a liar and his wife's a whore. Is sort of Cooper just goes off on this. And Ecker, you know, has radio shows from like just the last few years where he's like, I need to clear the air about Bill Cooper because some idiots, you know, think he was a hero, and he will just go off on it's.
Oh yeah, I've heard him. Yeah,
awesome. It is awesome. Ecker was on a show and there were call-ins, and I was like, should I call in and ask him if his wife was a prostitute for the Mayflower Madam? Like, should I do that? I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's, and now I have regrets about not doing that. I just think it would have been funny, or just say, hey, have you heard about Bill Cooper, Don? What do you think of him? Do you think he was on the up and up? So Cooper is basically drummed out of ufology, and he turns it around saying, you know what, UFOs aren't real anyway. It's all a deception to bring about the New World Order, because we're all going to have to band together to fight the fake alien invasion. Right. And he gets into the political,
which he probably borrowed
stuff
from Watchmen, really, if you think about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was it just because he was getting a good response from that material he was dabbling in with, like, the more conspiracy oriented? He's like, man, screw it, I'm just going to do this.
I think once he realized that that there was an untapped audience for some of the conspiracy stuff, and that sort of it's hard to pinpoint exactly when the transition took place. It's sometime around 91. It's after Behold a Pale Horse is published in like 90 or 91, but before 93, because by 93 he's on the, you know, UFOs are all, you know, they're not from space. They're man-made. They're to deceive you. But it's a gradual change. But if you go onto YouTube, you can see lots of videos of him doing presentations back in the early 90s, and like 10-hour-long presentations. And he's transitioning out of the UFO stuff more to the New World Order, government conspiracy sort of thing. And eventually this he gets involved with the militia movement, although that's a weird thing, because he always because Bill could never, you know, be the second best at anything, right? He always sort of talked about how his militia that he was a part of, the Second Continental Army of the Republic, and the intelligence service, that he was the head of the intelligence service for the Second Continental Army of the Republic and the Citizens Agency for Joint Intel. He's like a kid making up these little clubs with names. I mean, I did this when I was in like 3rd grade, right? Me and my buddies have a club. There's 3 of us, but we all have, there's a complex systems of like hierarchy and rank and what we all do in our club, right? Bill's like 50 doing this. And you know, he's got some people on board with him. He's got his operatives all around the country sending him raw intelligence, newspaper stories, but raw intelligence. And his relationship to the rest of the militia movement in the 1990s is kind of unclear. He didn't like a lot of them. He did not like the Freemen in Montana, the Montana militia. Freeman, yeah, Montana Freeman, I think that's what they were called. They had a standoff, and he was like, these guys are idiots. You know, this is, you know, the government is using them to maneuver into a situation where they can justify taking all the guns, because that's what everything was. But he didn't get along with anybody, really. And then he gets into the tax protester stuff, and turns out he hadn't really been filing his taxes, and so there was a warrant out for him and his wife's arrest, and you know, he turns this into, you know, it's a standoff against the government. It wasn't really, because after Waco and Ruby Ridge, the government's position on Cooper was, eventually he's going to go into town for groceries and we will just arrest him. We are not going to storm his house. There's a autobiography by a guy named Steve Fillerup, who was the FBI agent who basically dealt with Cooper. And there's a chapter on Cooper in his autobiography. I think it's called Heaven's Hammers. And it's pretty good. It's a pretty good read. But he's constantly pleading with the IRS, you know, and the federal marshals, don't do anything stupid, because Cooper has made it clear that he is not going to be taken alive. So, you know. And so on his radio show, he's talking about, you know, his family's up there with him, and they're secure and they're happy. And if you look at his FBI file, which has been released, it's out there on the internet, his family had already left, and the FBI was talking to them. They were like in hiding in Los Angeles. Cooper was telling his radio listeners that they were actually overseas for their own protection. No, his wife had up and left him because she was scared. So it's just a fascinating story, and listeners have probably heard or have the impression that they've heard about that he was killed by the government. That's what the story usually is, gunned down by forces of the New World Order or something like that. What happened is he threatened a prominent doctor in town, and the doctor went to the police like, what are you going to do? And there was a new sheriff, and the new sheriff
in town.
Arizona too.
Yeah. And yes, seriously, like, new sheriff in this little town in Arizona. The old sheriff had been content to let Cooper just sort of, you know, basically let himself be under house arrest, which is what he was doing. New sheriff wanted to sort of make a name for himself, and so they come up with. If you read the Jacobson biography, it goes into detail on their plan and how it all went wrong. This plan to basically lure Cooper out of his house and arrest him in the middle of the night. And it doesn't work. And Cooper ends up shooting a couple deputies and then ends up getting shot himself. And it wasn't about the tax thing. It wasn't a federal operation. The feds were not entirely pleased with how everything turned out. This was a local law enforcement debacle. But that's what they want you to think, right? But
much of
Cooper,
these. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, it was November of 2001 when this happened, and so 17 years. And if you go on message boards and stuff now, and on Reddit, there's noobs showing up saying, hey, have you guys heard about William Cooper? Is it true they killed him because he revealed the truth about 9/11 being an inside job? And because Cooper basically invented that on September 11th. He's sort of just thinking out loud and riffing on this stuff, and he comes up with this inside job thing like on the day. And he's just sort of a conspiracy savant. And you know, the UFO stuff is almost entirely forgotten. For a while, I was constantly going back and putting the UFO stuff back into his Wikipedia article because people kept taking out all the UFO content. I was like, no, he was a flying saucer guy.
Wikipedia wars.
Seriously, I was like, then I realized I got to do something with my life. This is no way to live.
Well, it seems like with so many of these guys, like Cooper, their deaths are self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah. He knew how he wanted to go out.
Right. I'm gonna go out in blaze of glory.
Yeah, because otherwise he's not credible. Because if he's telling the truth, they're going to silence him by any means necessary. So it's a way to ensure that his message lives on. Also, I think he realized that Bill Cooper would not have done well in prison. He was not going to go to prison.
I don't know. They sure liked his book in there, from what I've heard.
Yeah, the Jacobson book goes into that quite a bit, and that's one of the things about Cooper that I was not, really fully conversant with, is just how much influence he had in the '90s hip hop community. With just all the references in music and everything to Bill Cooper. And there was a quote that sticks with me. It's something along the lines of, I can't remember who said it, but something along the lines of, like, we always knew that the CIA was trucking crack into the ghetto, and now here's some cracker in Arizona saying the same thing. Like, we'd never heard a white guy say that before. And so, there were some things that resonated, and it sort of belies some of the sort of, I think, in a lot of cases, sloppy and lazy accusations of Cooper being some sort of generic white supremacist, because he wasn't. He was not always as careful with his discourse on race as you might want to be, but he wasn't some sort of white nationalist type of conspiracy theorist.
And he would come out and made that pretty clear a lot of times.
There were sometimes some of these white supremacists would call him on the show, and he would just take him apart, and after informing them that his wife was from Taiwan, would sort of explain why they were wrong. There's a great you can find it on YouTube. There's a great listener call in where he basically convinces this guy that being a neo-Nazi is dumb, and the guy's like, I never looked at it like that. Like Cooper basically talks him out of his neo-Nazi beliefs on the air, which is just, you don't hear other conspiracy guys in the '90s with radio shows doing that sort of thing, and you certainly don't hear it now.
Didn't he have some kind of weird idea to buy a bunch of stock in different companies or something?
And media companies.
This might be my favorite plan that anybody has ever come up with. In order to get the mainstream media to cover important topics fairly and from a constitutional perspective, and by various topics, he almost always means gun control and income tax. Those are the two it was probably the most concerned about for a lot of this time. In, I want to say 1994 or 1995, he comes up with an idea to basically purchase a major media company. And there's one episode of The Hour of the Time where he literally reads from stock prospectuses word for word. It is radio death. It is. I listened to the whole thing, but it was horrible. And he finally, alights upon Gannett, which was in the process of buying up a whole lot of newspapers around the country and was the company that started USA Today, which by the mid-'90s was finally turning a profit after 15 years. And so his plan was to have listeners buy shares of Gannett stock, which was $50 a share, so not cheap. And then go to a notary public once they get all their stock paperwork, before we did all our stock stuff with an app on our phone and we actually got, paperwork. I'm old, I remember that. And then take your paperwork, dear listener, to a notary public and sign over your proxy voting rights to Bill Cooper. And he was going to get all these notarized statements that he had people's proxy votes. And he was going to go to the 1995 shareholders meeting and with only 15% of the stock, he would be able to command a controlling interest in Gannett because of something. I can't remember his reasoning for why that would work. But he and then he
Wow.
he figured if he had like a controlling number of shares, he would automatically have the power to dictate editorial policy. And, ignoring the fact there's like 100 people between major stockholder and guy writing the editorial, right? You don't, I mean, I guess you could fire everybody working for the newspaper and replace them with people who, well, with the staff of his newspaper, Veritas, that he published. Replace it with the Veritas staff. And, I guess USA Today would be the Bill Cooper show. But it's the dumbest thing ever. And the best part was nobody went along with this. He only ever had like 2 or 3 people, I think, actually buy the stock and send it to him. A very small number. And there's one episode of the show from 1995.
You've listened to a lot of these.
I did. I've listened. It's addicting, and you sort of figure out
The
pretty
intro,
quick which
man. The intro comes on. Have you heard of that?
Is it with the sirens or whatever?
Yeah, it's got sirens and dogs.
Dog.
And it's like the curfew. The curfew.
The curfew of your body, soul, and mind, or something. Yeah, it's don't listen to it at night. It'll freak you out. But he there was this episode where he just goes on this epic rant against the lazy, good-for-nothing people out there who won't stand up and buy some shares of Gannett stock to save America. And he puts it in those terms, like when the jackbooted thugs of the New World Order haul your family to the camps, don't come crying to me. This whole thing, it's outstanding. He is the angriest. It might be the angriest man of the decade. And Bill Clinton, when he was in the White House, actually singled out Bill Cooper as, a dangerous radio host. And after the Oklahoma City bombing, it comes out that Timothy McVeigh and somebody else that was unidentified visited Cooper and were sort of asking him questions. And Cooper was like, you guys are kind of nuts, and like, don't do anything illegal, don't do anything stupid, and good day, sir. And that he was asked about it by the FBI, and he told them that story. And there's story, I don't know if you've heard that McVeigh claimed that he had a microchip in his butt cheek. And he asked Cooper to feel his butt cheek, to feel the microchip, and Cooper declined. But in later years, Cooper said, "I wish I would have." Once he knew what happened, he wishes that he would have done that to know if there was a microchip or not. But it's
things are getting a little weird.
Yeah, it's a wild scene. It's a wild scene there in Arizona.
Do you think that Alex Jones stole his stick?
Yes, I do. I think Alex Jones stole it and doesn't do it as well, because I don't. When Alex Jones, sobs and cries and screams, I don't believe it. I mean, we all know he's just Bill Hicks anyway. But even if even if you sort of just take it at face value, it's forced. He's always come across as so contrived. The running around the woods to spy on Bohemian Grove, and the tears and the histrionics, it's an act. Bill Cooper's anger was not an act. I'm not saying he believed every word he said all the time, but his anger was real. And I think that's what makes him such a compelling figure, and to listen to even now is his anger is real, and his happiness when talking about his kids or reading a letter or taking a phone call from somebody else who who fought in Vietnam and then sort of reminiscing about stuff. Cooper has a genuineness about him. That doesn't mean that he wasn't a dangerous and sometimes very frightening figure, but he's honest about some stuff. And I don't get that from Jones. I think Jones is very 21st century.
Playing a character,
and yeah, he's playing a role, and as he said in what was it, his custody hearing, right?
Yeah.
He came up, but he's just playing a game. That's what he has to say. He really believes it all. It's like no, I don't think he does, and I don't expect him to. I'm kind of glad he doesn't believe it all, because that would be troubling. But Cooper had a raw, frightening honesty to him.
So I think this is a good segue. Me and Adam have been talking a lot about how, because of the internet and just the pace at which the culture has changed and these conspiracy narratives have continued, there's kind of a disconnect with this kind of 90s old school stuff that had traceable roots, and I think a lot of the people at the time were aware of the roots of a lot of these narratives. But what do you think about kind of what's going on now in this culture, where it's going, and the themes? And we're seeing a lot of leftover stuff from the 90s.
Yeah.
The satanic panic stuff still, the children and pedophilia stuff, and
Yep.
all these themes that just keep being recycled. Would you have imagined that these themes would still be going like this? I mean, I guess they have been going since the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
so it doesn't.
Right. I'm not surprised. What I am, I don't want to say saddened by, I'm disheartened by, a little bit, is that. I never quite know how to explain this without sounding like I'm being all get off my lawn, but conspiracy stuff has gotten dumber and more shallow since the 90s.
Yes.
And I blame the internet.
Yeah.
I blame the internet, because there was a time where to learn about any of this, unless you were listening to it on a radio show, but those were in like little 1 hour chunks, and you couldn't really get a full picture of anything. You had to go read stuff, even if it was stuff on the internet. I mean, most of what I learned about in conspiracy stuff back in the 90s was massive, long text files that were hard to read, and because we didn't have tablets, I'm staring at a CRT monitor and probably getting, eye cancer or something. And, you had to read and you had to put stuff together. And now there's like these little 15-minute YouTube videos that tell you everything you need to know in a neat little listicle about the conspiracy. And it's a very sort of shallow, surface level sort of conspiracy thinking. And another thing that is, sort of troubling, and a development that I'm not entirely happy about, is it's always been the case that the conspiracy theories one was attracted to were an outgrowth of the political ideas you had or the political beliefs you held. Something that I think is slightly different nowadays is the conspiracy theories that people adhere to are very much an expression not of their political philosophy, but of their partisan identification. It's, if you look at a lot of the 90s conspiracy theory people, they one of the sort of tenets of conspiracy thinking is when you dig even a little bit, you realize that all of this is a sham, right? That's sort of actually very damaging cliche as far as the political life of the nation goes. This idea that it doesn't matter because because they're all hanging out of Bohemian Grove together. They're all on the same side, and that's the side of the globalists or the corporatists or the fascists or the communists. But now it's the Democrats are doing this, the Republicans are doing this. The party structures have become intertwined with, to a greater degree, with how people view their political philosophy.
These, instead of it being some international, evil organizations, it's like, oh no, it's just the Democrats themselves are doing rituals and have these pedophile networks and have this evil religion to them.
It's Pizzagate, man. It's Pizzagate isn't the Illuminati. Pizzagate's the Democrats. And there are left-wing conspiracy theories that jump into the same area. But I do think in a lot of ways, the most sort of complex and long-lasting conspiracy theories in America in the 20th and 21st century tend to have been more right-wing conspiracies. Just if you sort of total them up on the big chalkboard, it tends to break that way. There are smaller sort of micro conspiracies that tend to be more left in their leanings. CIA drugs into inner cities sort of thing tends to be more of a left-wing conspiracy theory. Right-wing conspiracy theorists would say, well, that's what they want you to think to excuse the horrible drug behavior. So it's I think the partisan identification is something that's changed. Whereas you had somebody like Bill Cooper, had a hand in along with a guy named Aaron Russo in starting up the Constitution Party in the United States. Which those are some fun episodes of the show too, where he goes into reading off a list of where the Constitution Party is meeting in every state in the union or something. Jimmy's Diner at 7 p.m. on Tuesday the 7th. Go there and tell Fred that Bill says hi. So that sort of thing. So whereas now it's like this conspiracy is a conspiracy by this party against my party. Back in the day, they're like, we need to create new parties. We need to create a new party and get back to some sort of fundamental.
I think it shows just how much that, and it's on the right wing. I mean, it's on the Republican side, no doubt about it. Where they have really co-opted the conspiracy theory community to get votes, to get elected.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing and pretty troubling.
Right.
Stories and narratives that I would see on various websites, I was like, oh yeah, this is right wing, like fringe right wing conspiracy stuff. Not just sort of, that lousy Clinton, not that kind of conspiracy, but just sort of the really scary stuff. I'm seeing not word for word, but you see talking points start to pop up in more mainstream right-wing media, in politicians' spokespeoples. That's a word.
Well, just like the whole George Soros thing now.
Yeah, I'm seeing people's grandmas and old aunts like commenting on people's stuff on Facebook, telling them about George Soros.
When Chuck Grassley says, "I think there's something to it," to a reporter, that's like, what?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those. Is this real life? Sort of moments where talking points from the fringiest, most overblown piece of David D's artwork on certain websites showing an evil David tattooed Soros, pouring a bucket of immigrants into America. It's like this is in the halls of Congress now, and that's troubling. That's troubling.
The Republican Party though had when the Birchers were really on fire, they really played the role of moderation of extreme elements, and that was kind of the official narrative and everything. And so now it's like, they have just blown it wide open and encouraged all this.
Are you saying that we should bring the Birchers back so we got some control over the nuts? I mean, that's
yeah, the
kinda what it
Birchers had a
sounds
lot
like.
more sense than these guys. I mean, it's-
Yeah. Oh, the Birchers had no idea what to do after the communists went away. Like, what? I'm scared.
Caught them off guard, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a really good article that was published like in the last couple days on the Baffler magazine about the 1992 election and sort of the splintering of the Republican Party into the paleoconservative and neoconservative wings, and sort of the role that David Duke's attempt to run for governor of Louisiana played, and the rise of Pat Buchanan, and the shift towards that more sort of extremist viewpoint, which was always more at home with the sort of widescreen conspiracy theories. It's a long article, but it's good, and it sort of made me feel old that my high school and college days are now being discussed as a historical moment. That's kind of sobering, like, well, it was like 30 years ago, or 20 years ago. So.
I know the feeling. I think I'm around the same age as you.
But it feels like there's this huge historical disconnect, even though it's not that far away. I mean, it seems like...
Yeah.
Well, there's just, as your book has proven, there's historical disconnects all over the place and all of this stuff.
Yeah. But it just feels like... The 90s feel a lot longer ago than they were. It's been a long century so far here in the 21st century.
We cannot end this interview without talking about Peter Beater, which is a very unfortunate name.
I can see why he always said Peter S. Beater when he wrote it down, but no, he would always Dr. Beater. Dr. Beater was an interesting. Peter Beater was sorry, that's juvenile, but Peter Beater was an interesting guy, and it's just his name, guys. Grow up. But he was an economist, business finance guy back in the 70s who started doing these audio letters. Basically, before he didn't have a radio show or a shortwave show or anything, he would send out these cassette tapes once a month. And it was mostly conspiracy theories about the dangers of the Rockefellers. That was his big bad guy, was the Rockefeller political and financial dynasty, which if you are a sort of extreme Goldwater, Birch-style right-winger in the 70s, the moderate country club Republicans, I mean, the Rockefellers were like the poster child for moderate country club conservatives in the 1970s. And one of them was Nelson Rockefeller was vice president. Was he elected vice president? No, he was appointed because, Gerald Ford took over and then appointed Rockefeller to be vice president after Watergate, and so the Rockefellers were taking over. But the weirdest thing about Peter is concerned about the Rockefellers' power and influence behind the scenes. It's that he alleged that the Rockefeller-led conspiracy had perfected the technology of organic robotoids, basically doubles. And Gerald Ford had been killed and was a robotoid. Jimmy Carter and his entire family were robotoids. And you could tell by watching on TV, that they weren't quite right after, they went away for Christmas and they came back and clearly had been replaced by organic robotoids. And, there was a covert war in space being fought against the Soviet Union. It was, and these things are all online. I think it's peterbeater.com, which let me make sure before listeners go check that. Yeah, it's peterdavidbeater.com, but Peter Beater.
You might get another website if it's just Peter Beater.
Yeah, BETER, not BEAT. ER. Don't put that in. Don't show people at a party or something. Look at this website; it's crazy. But they have all of the audio letters in MP3 in high and low quality, and also transcripts. So, which is pretty amazing, and it's all free, which is great. Also, he talked to, I don't know if you guys remember Sherman Skolnick. He was a judicial activist in Illinois back in the 60s. He was part of uncovering some massive bribery scandal in Illinois, but then he went on the more political conspiracy beat, and he just died probably like 10, 15 years ago. But he was a pretty big deal. The guy wrote a book called The Conspiracy Against the Dollar. There's a lot of, anti-federal type stuff going on. Russian particle beam weapons, sort of the war in space. It's wild stuff. And he's got this great voice, this sort of nasally voice. He reminds me in both how he looks and how he sounds. If you remember old episodes of Seinfeld, the rabbi that lived in Elaine's building, if listeners have seen those episodes of Seinfeld, that's how this guy looks and sounds. It's very funny. And this is Dr. Beater with audio letter 4, so it's great stuff.
Do you have quite the collection of tapes and memorabilia, old zines and books?
I had to get another external hard drive recently because I ran out of room for some stuff, and I was like, you know what? Do I need all this? I'm like, yes, I do, because the odds that peterbeater.com is going to disappear off the internet one day are honestly pretty good. I'm not sure who is maintaining this, but websites go away all the time. So if they've got a bunch of MP3s from the 70s, yeah, I'm going to grab those. Same thing with anything that's out there from Mae Brussels' old show. Yeah. She was one of the conspiracy theorists from back in the 70s, one of the early JFK assassination researchers who went in a bunch of different directions. There's some of her stuff out there, and I download all the stuff I can, because you never know when you might need it. And this sounds so sad. It's nice to have on in the background while you're working sometimes, just to have this sort of nasally drone about the robotoids in the background. that honestly might just be me.
That has to be great.
Well, I listen to shortwave, so I find some weird cult leader or some weird foreign broadcast and just put that on with some noise in the background.
Yeah, he does find some weird stuff.
Shortwave was great. One thing that I miss from back in those days was public access TV.
Oh yeah, I got into a lot of this stuff from public access TV when I was like 11 years old.
Yeah, I remember in college, my roommate, just for fun, he had some tapes of the local county militia group had its own public access show where he lived, and we just watched that. It was just like two guys in camouflage sitting on an empty sound stage with a little coffee table and a plant in the corner. Just talking.
I remember they had
wild.
Louis Farrakhan had speeches. There was some kind of like weird right wingers who had a show, and they just play all these documentaries. They do like remember the Clinton Chronicles were on there.
Oh yeah.
Nazi UFO stuff and all kinds of different videos and documentaries.
Yeah, that's something that kids today don't really get. Is there was a time when all of this stuff you just sort of happened across it. You couldn't Google search for it. There was you didn't see it shared on Facebook or
3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing else going on.
Yeah, and there was and even when you found stuff on the internet, there was no Wikipedia. So now almost anything I don't understand, I can plug into Wikipedia and get at least some information and some good links to check out. It used to be you had to, even before Google, searching for stuff on Alta Vista, and other sort of first generation search engines. I mean, it not to sound old, but man, it's so much easier nowadays.
Yeah.
To find stuff. Yeah, but Peter Beater. I'm trying to remember where I first heard about Peter Beater. It might have been. It might. You know what? I think Greg Bishop told me about Peter Beater.
That sounds like
At some
something
point.
Greg would,
Yeah,
would talk about. Yeah.
I think Greg Bishop, made me aware of Peter Beater. Yeah.
And
I was
on
trying
that
to think about how to phrase that.
Aaron, where can people get the book and also hear your wonderful podcast?
If you go to saucerlife.com, there are episodes of the show, over 50 of them now,
nice.
Which is amazing that I've had the diligence to do that. So all those episodes are there, and on the right side of the screen as you scroll down, there are links to books I've written on Amazon that you can find. And so saucerlife.com, and saucerlife on Twitter as well.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Aaron. This has been great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun.
Stay on the line for us. We're going to close this section out, but guys, we'll be back to close the show on Conspirinormal. Okay, we're back. Very cool, very interesting interview.
Very extensive, even though we really just scratched the surface on a lot of that.
Yeah, we really did. We didn't even cover what I wanted to really, some of the stuff that I wanted to cover, like the Hollow Earth stuff. Although we did get to do a Patreon episode with
Juicy.
him on Transformation of America.
And thanks for the memories.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have those books? Don't you have one of those?
No, I do not. I think I have both of them on like PDFs.
Okay.
But they were everywhere back in the day. I used to read them at Tower Books, but they are now like I think $60 to $80.
I wonder
out of
if
print,
we could get Kathy O'Brien on the show.
Hey, that'd be.
I wonder if we
Heavy
could
hitter.
try. Yeah. Because I wonder if they're still in Nashville, because they talk about Nashville a lot, as you'll find out on the
possible.
Patreon episode.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Local people. Local weirdness.
Very strange. Very strange.
You got any thoughts on any of the things that we talked about?
Oh, it was cool. There's just so many, and like you said, the tentacles of all these conspiracies. It's like genealogy. Like it's like, oh, eventually someone is related to King whatever. It's like, but it was cool. We didn't touch on the like international banking stuff, or there were some other things we didn't touch on, but it was pretty exhaustive, or at least a good overview of kind of the origin of conspiracy theory, and especially its impact in America.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I really like the book just because it came from that kind of historical.
Yeah, and it's academic,
setting.
but it's
Right.
because it's historical. It's not like so much of other, criticism of conspiracy that comes from academic circles. That's just like more political, more of a bent to it. Whereas this was kind of just a historical overview.
Yeah. I have something I want to share.
Uh-oh.
This is just some random weirdness. So, there is a quote-unquote prophetess out there named Kat Kerr. She looks like a very kindly old lady. And she has a book out called Revealing Heaven. And this is all about apparently her trip to heaven. Now, this I guess is on the this is a book that's selling in the Christian bookstores. I guess they would probably have it at Lifeway in downtown. But here's kind of a description of it from Amazon. God has lifted the veil between heaven and earth. Caught up by the Spirit of God, Kat Kerr was taken on tours of heaven for over 10 years and now commissioned to reveal the truth through an illustrated book. The foreword, a prophetic word from God, was dictated to the author by 2 scribe angels. Through the 10 illustrations in Volume 1 of Revealing Heaven, you will visit the portal, where the redeemed in heaven go to view their loved ones on earth. You will see the Rush, heaven's largest roller coaster, and visit the nurseries for miscarried and aborted babies, and much more. This book also explains God's design for earth, which is a shadow of heaven. Besides detailed descriptions of the mansion she walked through, Kat shares about 3 individuals, one a teenager, she saw while in heaven, and how this information impacted their families upon her return to earth. Prepare to be forever changed and receive hope for eternity. Okay.
No.
So, a little information about her is while growing up in a family of 15, Kat Kerr worked closely with her father in a lay ministry that helped needy people, widows, and those abandoned by society and or their families. She accepted Christ as her Savior at age 4, and now 51 years later still loves helping people. So far, so good. Kat is a faithful member to her local church and has been involved in many areas of ministry for over 25 years. She is trained and studied under prophetic leadership and operates in a seer anointing. Prior to her experiences in heaven, she worked for 24 years in key positions in the business world and is now president of One Quest International, which was founded for the purpose of revealing heaven to earth. A mother of 3 gifted daughters, Kat resides in Northeast Florida with her husband of 30 years. The sign on her front door reads, "This is a holy place. Heaven is here, and you are welcome." It just so happens that I have an audio clip that I would like to share of her describing heaven. So if you're ready to hear what heaven is like, Surfiel, I will go ahead and play that.
All right, let's see.
May take a little bit of time to buffer.
And we already know that there's places in heaven that represent seasons on this earth. He took a shadow of a place in heaven and made it a whole season on this earth, like the wintertime. They have Christmas Town in heaven.
Yes.
There's a fun place for you. In the summertime here on the earth, that's the shadow of Wipeout Surf Park, where you can ride 80-foot waves and you're not going to die. That's the fun part. It's funny how most of these have fun parts. And then there's a mountain of spices in heaven where fall is always there. And you can go on horseback rides up into the beautiful fall area. Every level is another aroma. The mountain of spices is also mentioned in the Bible. You need to find that scripture too. And so that's another thing that he took a shadow of and made fall on this earth, which we're entering into that season right now. I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I've seen the one in heaven, and it is amazing. And of course, there's spring. And let me tell you, spring is a shadow of the friendly forest in heaven, where the trees sing, the flowers will dance with you, even the rocks cry out and worship him.
And also the field with the copter flowers.
That's right outside the friendly forest, by the
Yes.
way. As you're entering into the friendly forest in heaven, you come down this big hill, and there's these tall flowers. They look sort of like huge daisies.
Yeah.
But the face of the flower is faced upward to the sky, and people run down this hill into this field of flowers everywhere. They grab the stalk, because these flowers are like 6 foot high. They'll grab it and it takes off into the air and takes them like a flower copter. That's what they call them. And it will carry you from there into the friendly forest. So,
That's so cool.
because in heaven, the cows drive the tractors. Go ahead and laugh, Jen.
I love it.
If you have any children up there like 3 and over or 2 on up, they always take them to the fun farm because it's where they learn prophetic art. They learn art. They actually have art classes. And this is the wild thing about the fun farm. It's
Yeah.
got to be different, right? It can't be like on the earth.
Who are the art instructors?
The art instructors, I love this part. It doesn't matter. I died a long time ago to myself. I don't have my own opinions. I can only share what I saw.
Right.
The rabbits.
That's right.
Hello. The whole bunny thing and the colored egg thing and looking for them actually comes from heaven. They put all the kids in this big wagon that the cow with coveralls and a farmer's hat drives them to the art barns. This is only going to get better, so don't go anywhere. This is either giving you a joy and celebration or ammunition. Don't waste it on us. We don't listen to the blasting stuff. And here come these 5 and 6 foot tall rabbits, every color of the rainbow you can imagine. They have aprons on. They have all kinds of things in the pockets that they're going to give out to all the children. Are so excited because they know they're going to learn art. But they don't know what they're going to be doing, what kind of art they're going to be doing. And before they even arrived, these rabbits were busy because they were going out into the fields. They're picking up these eggs. These eggs are like ostrich eggs of that size. They're all white. Every one of them's white. They're putting them in these baskets, so when the kids come, they pass them down the tables, and all the kids take a couple of these eggs out. And then they have a little mat to set them on, and the angels then begin to give them the brushes. These are brushes. They look very much like brushes on the earth, except for one thing. They're not sticking them in little containers, plastic containers of paint. Because what happens is the paint is colored light. It's like liquid light. And they're all different colors, and they appear right in front of the children in the air. And they can take and dip their little brush in it, and they begin to paint these eggs, every kind of color that is possible. And they put flowers on them, smiley faces. They probably make them into minions. You know, if they currently went there, if they currently went to heaven, they use all the new stuff that we have.
Yeah.
You know, 20, 30 years ago, there were no minions.
No.
But now there's minions.
Of course.
So they're painting like swirls all up and down the egg,
sense
rainbows,
to
whatever it
me.
is. Then they'll hold it in their hand, and they hear this little sound. And the teacher will take the top part of the egg off, and out of that egg, into the rabbit's other paw, will come either a baby chick or a baby rabbit.
Yep.
And those baby chicks and rabbits will be the identical color of what that rabbit painted the egg. So whatever they paint the eggs as, out will come these
Right.
little chicks and bunnies
Yes.
from these. And then the kids start yelling. They are so excited. They want to finish those eggs.
Wouldn't you be?
These mushrooms that get to sit on like seats.
Yeah.
They all sit on a little mushroom. They find all the children, and they're all facing in one direction because they're going to see a concert of the flowers. And they'll sit there, and these mushrooms, because this is a supernatural place called heaven, they begin to rise up in the air like where the mushroom is rooted in the ground. It begins to rise them up into the air, and then the flowers come in this huge field. They begin to grow right out of the ground with faces on them. They begin to swirl around each other. They create a beautiful tapestry of all these beautiful flowers, and the flowers begin to sing. Some of them are fun songs, and the kids learn them, and the kids sing them with them. So if you think your child is not having fun in heaven, you better think twice. It's a whole little city in heaven made out of Jell-O. Every flavor of Jell-O. They have pools of whipped cream. They have pools of sprinkles, and you can get the Jell-O. You eat the
It's
mailboxes.
just like going to
You
Corral.
jump in the houses. They have swimming pools made out of Jell-O, and these kids
Heaven
run to
is
get in this
so
place.
far away.
And they have a roller coaster called the Rush, which is their biggest roller coaster, that goes up this long track, and then it leaps from the track
Yep.
across the sky of heaven down to another part of the track. And then this track goes down under the crystal sea so you can breathe under the water in heaven. And that was where one of my first powerful testimonies came from, that I saw a young girl who had died recently and was living in heaven with her great-grandfather, and he was taking her someplace to have fun, and that's the first time I found out about he was taking her in to ride
Yep.
the Rush.
Okay. That's what's waiting for you in heaven,
I think
if you-
Grandma's doctor.
if you believe.
I think Grandma's doctor treats her right. I think she gets plenty of her.
Yeah, I mean, is that a vision of heaven or an LSD trip? That sounds like Pepperland a little bit to me, is what that kind of sounds like. You know, we started off the show speaking to Aaron, and of course we had him back on, and when we first had him on, talking about UFO contactees. And that right there was crazier than anything I ever heard from any contactee.
I believe that would qualify as high strangeness.
That would indeed qualify as high strangeness. Apparently, also, she has some prophecies about Trump as well. So, yeah, this is someone to obviously be taken seriously. Just wanted to put that out there. So, you guys, you just found out what heaven is like.
And it isn't too far away.
Yes, right. And it's made of Jell-O, or the rivers are made of Jell-O. And sprinkles, and you can make minions, and the cows drive the tractors, and it's just a great place. It's not like what the Talking Heads said, where they said that heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Apparently there's a lot going on there. All right, that's it. Next time, Nick Redfern is coming back. We're going to talk about paranormal parasites with him. Really excited to have him back talking about this. We are going to have a Patreon with Aaron up, and we've had some other Patreons that we're going to have up as well. So you can find that at patreon.com/Conspirinormal. So come give us some money, and maybe we'll tell you what heaven is like. All right. Sir Fiel, thank you so much for recording. By the way, if you notice, Rob was not here. We were recording back in Studio B today. So, but we are hoping that he will be back with us. We miss him. He has not gone to heaven yet. So, all right. We'll be back next time, guys, on Conspirinormal.
You